Hey everyone, welcome back. In this video, we're going to learn how to get started with VEX and Robotc. Your objectives are as follows. How to set up and configure Robotc, how to set up your motors and sensors, how to update the firmware, and how to open up and view our debugger window to view our motor and sensor values. And then we're going to learn how to adjust our motor and sensor values in the debugger window so we can better understand how to manipulate them later for future assignments. Let's go ahead and get started. All right, so the first thing you want to do is go ahead and open up Robotc here. Next, you want to come over here to Robot, and you want to go down to Platform Type, select VEX 2.0 Cortex, come back now, and select the platform type, and we want to select Natural Language PLTW. All right, then come on over here to File, and we're going to go to Open Sample Programs, and we're going to scroll down to PLTW. Okay, open up PLTW, and we're going to select the PLTW template and select Open. Once that's done, go ahead and enter the name of the assignment, your team members, the date, all right, and that should do it.
All right, so once you have your test bed made, the next thing you want to do is go ahead and grab an orange USB cable, plug it into the VEX Cortex here, and then run it over here to your computer USB port and plug it in. And once that's done, you're going to want to go ahead and grab a VEX battery here, all right, and plug it into your VEX Cortex. And please note, never remove your battery by pulling on or yanking on the wires here. What you'll do is you'll mess up the terminals. Always, and I mean always, remove your battery by grabbing this white receptacle here, the plastic piece, and pulling it out that way. If you need help, let me know.
All right, so once your Cortex is plugged into your computer, next thing you want to do is come up to Robot, and we're going to come to Motors and Sensors Setup. All right, and this is the place where you can set up your motors, your analog sensors, and your digital sensors. So the first thing we're going to do here is set up our motors. So in port 1, we're going to name this one Flashlight, and we're going to click here, and we're going to select VEX Flashlight. All right, and port 2, we're going to type in lowercase right, uppercase M motor. All right, and now we have to specify which motor type. And we have a VEX 393 motors. If you don't know what type of motor you're using, well, just look on the motor itself and it will tell you or specify the type of motor. In this case, we want to select VEX 393 motor. All right, and for port 3, you probably guessed it, we're going to do left motor, capital M O T R O. And once again, we're going to select VEX 393 motor. Okay, and down here in port 9, we're going to select servo motor. We're going to type in servo motor, capital M O T R. Okay, and we're going to select here. All right, we're going to select the 3-wire servo. All right, so once our motors and servos and flashlight is set up, we're going to click on VEX 2.0 analog sensors. All right, and we're going to enter our analog sensors. Okay, so we're going to type in line, capital F, follower, and then the type is sensor, and in this case, line follower. And then over here, we're going to type in potentiometer. And be careful on the spelling on this one. I'm going to double check it. Looks good. Come on over here to potentiometer. All right, and then in port 3, or input 3 here, okay, we're going to come type in light sensor, capital S E N S O R. And as you may have guessed, we're going to come on over here and select light sensor. So once we have our analog sensors inputted, now let's go do our digital sensors. Click here. And for the first one, in digital 1 input here, we're going to select limit switch. Okay, capital S, notice there. And we're going to type in, well, you may have guessed it. Okay, touch. All right, and we're going to type bump switch in the digital input below it. So bump, capital S, W-I-T-C-H, and once again, touch. Okay, and then down here, we're just going to type in quad, and we're going to select quadratic encoder. And then in digital 5 here, we're going to type in Sonar, and we're going to select Sonar, and we have to specify our inches here. Okay, so, or I should say we have to specify our type of units, and we're going to select inches. All right, and then come on down here to digital 12, and we're going to type in green for our green LED light, and we're going to come on down here and we're going to say VEX LED. Once that's all done, go ahead and select apply. Okay, and okay. And now you have all of your sensors, notice, up here at the top. All right, and this is important. Make sure the inputs here are the same inputs you used on your VEX Cortex. If not, they may not function. All right, very quickly, the one thing you want to do too, real quick, is go to View, and you want to come on down to Select Communication Port, and make sure it says Automatic Selection here, and then hit OK. And one other thing you want to check as well is go to Robot. Make sure your VEX communication mode is selected to VEXnet or USB, right? Because we're using that orange USB cable. Once all that's done, go ahead and save it. Okay, and you have everything set up. You don't want to lose it. So real quickly, I'm going to save it under Inputs and Outputs. Okay, so I'm going to call it Inputs and Outputs, and my name. All right, the next thing you want to do is download the firmware, and you can come here, but I don't recommend it. I recommend going to Robot, download firmware, coming down here to manually update firmware and selecting Robot C firmware, standard file VEX, okay, and selecting there. All right, and then go ahead and do it this way and update your firmware to your Cortex. All right, and once you have successfully downloaded, all right, and updated your firmware, go ahead and select OK. All right, so once you have two green lights here blinking on your Cortex, you're good to go. Come on up here now to, on Robot C here, come to Download to Robot. And what you're going to want to do now is come to Robot and go to Debugger Windows and check Motors here, all right? And here under Port 2 here, come on down to Power and type in 127 and make some observations here and hit Enter. All right, I'm going to set it back to 0 and hit Enter. Now, type in minus 127 and hit Enter and make some more observations. Okay, I'm going to set it back to 0 and select Enter. Now let's repeat this process here for port number 3. And in the power column here, I'm going to type in 127 and select Enter. Okay, record your observations. I'm going to set it to 0 now and select Enter. Okay, now I'm going to type in minus 127 and select Enter and record your observations. All right, I'm going to set it back to 0 here and select Enter. Okay, now go ahead and fool around with some different values besides 127. All right, and make sure you're recording your observations at all times. All right, next thing you want to do now is come back up to Robot in Debugger Windows and come on down and make sure Sensors is checked. Okay, the next thing we're going to investigate now is our line follower. Okay, so these values right here. So what you want to do is go ahead and grab like a white piece of paper or something and go ahead and hold it or place it over your line sensor and observe the values. Okay, and the line follower is a very interesting sensor. You can put it on a robot to follow a black line on the floor or something like that. Now go ahead and remove your white piece of paper and notice how the values change here. Okay, so quite a big difference. Okay, all right. All right, now let's go ahead and investigate here our potentiometer here. All right, this potentiometer can measure. All right, now let's go ahead and investigate the potentiometer. The potentiometer can determine both position and direction of rotation. So this measurement can help us to understand the position of robot arms or other mechanisms using programming software. So these things typically have limited rotation applications. All right, so what we're going to do now is take note of your potentiometer value here in your debugger window. It's 0. Okay, go ahead and turn it clockwise and counterclockwise and make any observations, okay, you have. All right, the next thing we want to investigate now are our two switches. All right, so if you look here on Robot C, you'll see them right here under touch. So let's go ahead and investigate what happens here when we push our limit switch. Okay, I'll push it again. All right, now let's investigate our bump switch and do the same thing. Let's go ahead and press our bump switch. All right, make sure you're recording your observations. All right, the next thing we're going to investigate is the optical encoder sensor seen here. The optical shaft encoder is used to measure both relative position and rotational distance traveled by a shaft. All right, so what we're going to do now is we're going to change the optical encoder environment, and we're going to observe the effect on the quad value here in Robot C. So look at Robot C here under quad. Let's go ahead now and turn our quadratic encoder here and see what happens here. Okay, note there is no clockwise or counterclockwise physical stop. Therefore, it can be turned indefinitely in either direction. All right, make sure you're recording your observations. All right, now let's go ahead and observe here our green LED here in Robot C. So what we want to do now is to change our value here from green. Let's see what happens when we type in 127 and enter. Okay, make your observations here. Remember, your LED here is on the cortex. Type in 0 again. Now type in minus 127. Select enter. See what happens. Okay, I'm going to select 0 again. All right, now let's come back to motors here. All right, now we're going to investigate our servo here. And remember, if something's not working, check to make sure everything is plugged into the correct port on your actual cortex or microcontroller. All right, so your servo should be plugged into port 9. All right, so now we're going to manipulate our power values here again. Let's type in 127 and select enter. Now let's type in minus 127 and select enter. Okay, make sure you're recording your observations here. And with regard to the servo, try different values, right? Try like 100, try 60. Okay, make your observations and please document them in your answer sheet. All right, so the next thing we're interested here is our flashlight. So let's go ahead now and click here on our power. And once again, let's type in minus 127. Make sure your flashlight's on and hit enter. All right, so check out what's going on with your flashlight, record your observations. Now let's try positive 127 and select enter. Okay, make your observations and try some different values like minus 100 instead of 127. Okay, try minus 20 and see what happens. Okay, so record your observations there. Okay. All right, and finally, let's head back over to sensors here. And the next thing we're interested in here is our Sonar, our digital 5 port. So, all right, so right now it reads a reading of 61. Let's place something over it here. I'm going to place this white card over it and see what happens here as I move it closer. Okay, it goes down to 1. As I move it farther back, the values change. All right, so once again, you do the same, and please record your observations. All right, and finally, the last sensor we're interested in here is our light sensor. And you notice mine has a reading of like 240 or so, and that's probably because of the lighting in my room. But let's see if we can change those numbers. So what we're going to do is we're going to go back to flashlight. Let's turn it on. I'm going to turn it to minus 127, hit enter. All right, and now I'm going to, let's put it over, let's go back now in Robot C to our sensors, and let's shine it over our light center and see how those values change here. Okay, I'm going to get it really close, and then I'm going to move it farther away. All right, and like I said, record your observations. Okay. All right, and when you're done, just go ahead and turn off your flashlight. All right, that'll do it. Hopefully by the end of this activity, you kind of have an idea on how to manipulate all of our sensors here and the values that are associated with each of our sensors and motors and servos. All right, thanks so much for watching. We'll see you next time.